Hey everyone, welcome to Scouting Session episode 12. I'm Jérôme Bérubé, and once again, I'm joined by Brad Allen. Hey Brad, how's it going?
Hey, Jérôme, it's going well. We got our list out, so feeling relief.
Yes, a lot of work put into this the past 2 months, but I feel the last few weeks have been pretty intense. So getting a bit some rest this week for us, but rest. I mean, the CHL NTDP prospect game is this week, but as far as like very intense scouting, it's a bit of a quiet week for you and I. And so today we're going to talk about our new release NHL Draft Rankings that are available on hockeyprospect.com. Um, Maybe Brad, we can start an overall look at this draft class. So we're almost in December right now. Maybe we can talk about maybe our thoughts on this class. Is it a good draft, a bad draft? Sometimes it's a bit risky to have a strong opinion really early on in the year, but I feel after 2-3 months now, I think we're getting a really good sense of what this class is, and so far it's not looking like a really strong class this year.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's not the Sedin twin to what, 99? Was that
Yeah,
1999?
yeah,
So it's
99.
not that bad. It's not that level where you have to pull a rabbit out of a hat like Brian Burke did, but we're thinking 2019 bad, which for us is probably the worst draft of the decade. 2018 is also not a good class, but the biggest difference between 2018 and 2019 is the top end. You're talking about Quinn Hughes, Rasmus Dahlin, Andrei Svechnikov, Noah Dobson. The list goes on. So because of the top end, I think the 2018 beats out the 2019 by a bit. I would say that this draft is probably slightly deeper than 2019, and I would hope that we're going to get more high-end talent out of it than we did in 2019, where so many players are bombing out like everywhere. Trevor Zegras isn't living up to it now. Vasily Pukolzin and Peyton Krebs. I mean, there's some. Bobby Brink was a huge prospect for us, and he's having difficulty staying healthy. The list goes on and on. Capo Caco. So it's one of those situations. Even Bowen Byram, tons of injuries. None of them are working out. So hopefully this class can at least have a better top end than 2019, and hopefully a little bit deeper too. But it falls into a bad category. I have talked to a couple of executives, a couple of player development coaches and scouts in the actual industry about this draft. They're usually, when I go and talk to any exec or scout, there's a back and forth, and we're going to disagree on a couple of things, or one of us might think that the middle of the draft is a bit better or whatever. In this class, everybody's in agreement, and that's a strong indicator. Everybody thinks this is a very bad draft. One executive was joking to me that he doesn't know what he's going to do because he has a lot of back half picks, and this is absolutely not the draft. If you have a lot of back half picks, you better have a real development staff, and you better have a very confident scouting staff if you're dealing with picks between round 4 and 7 in this class, because the pickings are extraordinarily slim. And as you said, Jérôme, I think we can feel comfortable stating that because we really have swept everything internationally. This is the weakest Russian class I can remember, the weakest Finnish class I can remember. The program is weak. It's one of those situations where Europe in total is weak. It's just not very good. The dub is good. The Q is okay. The O is pretty solid. So the CHL, you take it as a whole, pretty decent. USHL is weak. But that's really the only strength of this class is North America, and specifically the CHL.
Yeah, I mean, even as people are gonna see, I'm gonna put our top 32 on the screen soon, but even in our first round, there's a lot of guys that in our head we're going to project as third line player. I mean, we have guys in our top 15 that they might end up being third line players. So that's if you're looking for a good third line player, that might be the draft. That you're going to get. You're a good grinder, a good smart third line player, but this is just not a spectacular draft as far as like high end talent. Even like our number 2 and number 3 ranked player. We still have some disagreement on them. We're still not like super sold on them. So there's a lot of hockey left to be played. So, but it's not one of those years where 2023 where you had Bedard, Carlson, Mitchkov, Fantilli. This is really we are really far from that. So it's gonna be interesting to see how our November list looks like come June. How much change, because like you said, I think the depth of this draft is not exactly good. So I'm wondering, like, we have a top 64, which is available for members of our website. So the top 32 is free. The rest is for our membership. I wonder, like, how much that's gonna change. Right? It's probably gonna change. It does every year, but I'm really curious what it looks like come June. So let's talk about our top 32, Brad. We're gonna focus mostly on our top 10 today. And in future episode, we're gonna maybe talk about more guys. But for today, we're gonna discuss the top 10, Brad. So let's start with our number 10 ranked player. Ivan Ryabkin, which we have talked about before on this podcast in a recent episode. So he is still in Russia. There was some rumors that he might come to the USHL. Has not happening yet. He's playing in the VHL as of now. Not exactly a super league for him. So we're gonna maybe go a bit quickly on him, Brad, because since we already talked about him in a recent episode, but maybe a few notes on him, maybe for our viewers.
Sure. So Russian JT Miller, he is not off to a good start this season. He was projected coming in to probably be a top 5 pick. He has not played his way into the top 5 conversation this time. He's having difficulty scoring, and he's also playing the VHL, which is not going to help us. We do not want him in the VHL right now. So it'd be fantastic if he comes over. Let's wait and see. That said, we did watch the Future Cup, which is a tournament held in Russia, where it's the Russia U20s, Russia U18s, or is it U17s? I think it's U17.
U18.
Or sorry, U18, Russia U18, Russia U20, Kazakhstan, and Belarus. And that actually gives us more information for some of these kids, and we really needed it this season, and he did play better there. I thought he was pretty dominant in some of those performances. And I know it's just Belarus's U20 and Kazakhstan U20 team, but there's always a bit of sneaky skill and hidden talent on those teams. They do play very hard in that event. So it was one of those tournaments that we actually get to wait, like a typical tournament. But I would say that this player has a potential to move up considerably. I think we're at the low end of him right now, and rightfully so. If he starts to really get going and cook, then we're talking probably top 5, 6 player again.
Yeah. So I think in this case, we decided to stay patient. Also, there's not a lot of competition after him, so it was a pretty easy decision to make, just to let him start playing better and give him a bit more time. But yeah, so it's not going to be an easy situation, to be honest, with the VHL. But let's see what happens. Maybe he goes back in the MHL. MHL is a lot, I think, easier for us to scout. We have a better understanding of the league and what works, what doesn't work. So let's move on to number 9, Brad. Another guy we talked about before, but that was maybe a month ago. William Eklund from Sweden. So he's playing in in the second Swedish Pro League with Djurgården. So again, we're not going to go too much in detail with him because we did that a few weeks ago. But maybe a few notes here, Brad, on William Eklund.
Sure. The huge thing with Victor Eklund is that he has the diamond floor of this class. This player will play. It's very likely he plays in a top 6, and you don't have to worry about the pick. In this class right now, that is fantastic. That you can't ask for more. So, the ceiling is not right at the top, which is why he's a little back on our list. But in terms of potential to actually play meaningful games, he is sky high up there. I do not think there is a safer player in this class when you get past the top 3-4 players in this draft. That's why he's this high. The other aspect with him is the way he scales. He is arguably the smartest player in this entire class off the puck. So it's one of those situations where you blend that with a phenomenal motor and good skating, and it's one of those situations where there's just he can do everything. He's going to be able to forecheck. He's actually sneaky good defensively. He might actually be able to be put on a penalty kill. So there's a ton of versatility with the floor, and that's what he is. And it's just all about trying to get a sense of exactly where his absolute ceiling is relative to some of these other kids, and that will determine his ultimate placement.
Yeah, and he should play at the U20 this upcoming late December, early January. It's going to be a lot of attention on him. Frondell will likely not be on Team Sweden, so a lot of eyes will be on Eklund at the U20 if he's there. I think he should be there because he's been really strong in the Allsvenskens this season. So I don't see a reason why he wouldn't be on the U20 team unless he's injured. So a lot of eyes will be on him or in Ottawa. So I'm really looking forward for that. I think he's a really easy player to love. Like me personally, I love players that play with like a ton of energy. There's a lot of players I feel this year that are a bit too passive. Some of them we'll talk about coming soon. But Eklund is the opposite. He goes all out every shift. So I'm really, is he a first line player at the NHL level? That's what we need to decide. If he's really a first line player, I think we have him too low. So that's some of the question that we have will need to be answered in the coming weeks, coming months for him. But we like him as a player. We feel, as of now, I think we're pretty set on him as a top 6 forward. Now remains to be seen if he's like, can he be a legit first line player? We're not there yet. That's why he's number 9. And then we'll move on to number 8 from the WHL. Roger McQueen unfortunately got hurt really early in the year, so we did talk about him in one of our first episodes this season, and he got hurt right after. So still a very interesting player, I think, with his size and a lot of question mark, I think, next to his name, because at his best he should be higher than this, but his level of consistency has been very up and down. Not really this year, but in the past years. But there's a lot to like here. Obviously, 6'5", 6'6", that can skate like he does. Those are very good things if you're looking for a power center. But we're still would like to see him play a bit with actually a more physical game than what we saw early on in the season. So that's, again, we have a lot of questions with this player, and we don't really have any answers at this moment. We don't really know when he's going to come back. I've heard somewhere in December, but this was never made official. So I don't know if that's actually going to be the case. So Brad, maybe a few notes on him, but obviously the injury is going to be not a concern, but it's like tough blow for us to get more viewings. And obviously, he's missing a big week here with the prospect games that he's not gonna be there for those 2 games here.
Yeah. So the big thing with McQueen is massive frame, very good skater relative to his frame, phenomenal set of hands that you rarely see for a kid who's at this stage in his development at his size. Why is he a bit further back? Very simply, not the best mechanical shooter, not the best technical playmaker. He has difficulty feathering and saucering pucks. Everything's on the ice. It's not a bad thing to just be an efficient playmaker, which he is. But when you're talking about like true top end skill, specifically with his playmaking, he just doesn't really have it at this stage in his development. We're trying to take growth rate into consideration. It's going to be really tricky if he remains injured for most of the season, but we'll see what happens there. The other aspect is that he doesn't seem to understand yet how to really use his mechanics properly within his wheelhouse. He has difficulty on his power play setting up one-timers. He's much more of a net front presence with his goal scoring upside at this time. So we want to see mechanical development over the course of the season before we shift and move him back up the rankings.
Yeah. So if we continue with our list at number 7, we got Justin Carbonneau from Blainville-Boisbriand in the queue. I think of all the players I think we have in the top 10, he's probably the one who has the most different opinion on him amongst our staff. Either really well liked by some scouts, and other scouts are a bit more reserved on him. So that was an interesting, discussion that we had over the weekend about him. So he's been red hot in November. I think he's now tied for first in scoring in the queue. To me, the biggest I had him a bit lower than where we have him ranked. A big reason why was maybe the playmaking. I was a bit concerned about that. The consistency of his playmaking too was a bit what I was questioning. But there's no question that kid is so talented. Like on talent alone, he's an easy top 10 pick. The hands, the shooting ability. Like you look at most of his goals that he scores, you're like, yeah, that's an NHL goal. That's an NHL goal. That's an NHL goal. He's a pretty passionate player on the ice. Like we talk about some guys being a bit more passive. That's not him. He's very game. He has a ton of energy on the ice. So yeah, very interesting conversation we had about these players. Mark was supposed to join us today. Couldn't do it because of some scheduling, but Mark really likes this player. He was the one pushing for him to be really high on our list. And definitely I get it in the sense of the talent, but we have some different opinion on him, but it's going to be interesting. Like I have not seen him. I think my last few viewings of him were maybe early November, so I didn't see the when he got really red hot in mid-November. So definitely at some point I'm gonna get back to him and watch a bit more of him. Brad, I know you're also pretty similar to me in the sense of what you saw from him this season. So I'll just let you give a few notes here.
Sure. So for audiences who didn't listen to our podcast where we broke him down in more detail, basically he's like an inverse Kuzmenko, meaning that he's ridiculously talented, has some of the softest hands in this class, but unlike Kuzmenko, who's like a brilliant playmaker at times and is more of a primary playmaker than a secondary shooter, that's where the inverse comes in. That's where Carbonneau is a primary shooter and a secondary playmaker. So a lot of the disagreement with our rankings would come down to the playmaking upside and just how he operates offensively. This is a player who can be prone to overhandling pucks. He can be prone to making decisions with the puck that you typically don't want to see in a top 10 player. However, as Jérôme pointed out, this is a situation where it's a weaker class and there's not a ton of very high-end talent. This is one of them. This is one of the top 3 shooters in this class. He is a top 10 talent in this class. He is flourishing right now in November. And it's one of those situations, too, where because our staff has more limited viewings relative to what we'll have at the end of the season, we're going to get different perspectives on these players at this time. So there's going to be more arguments at this time specifically than usually at the end of the year with the top end, because by that time we'll have so many viewings and really know the ins and outs of the player. So on talent, he really does warrant a top 10 consideration, because you could really make an argument he's just learning how to operate as like a true total package type of player, because he's not very good off the puck. He doesn't really understand how to play a support game. There is really no secondary or ancillary skill set to him. He is just a dynamic offensive threat at this time. But it's one of those situations where sometimes in a draft where there is a tremendous amount of risk, it ain't too bad to just take the riskiest player, but who has the highest upside. So we're kind of banking on that. And it doesn't hurt either. He's on pace for over 100 points right now. So you really could say doesn't really understand what he's supposed to do yet sometimes, and he's still on pace for over 100 points, and he's a ridiculous talent. So from that perspective, it makes some sense.
Yeah, and just so people know, like the first list is always, I feel like the the hardest to do because we are in a race with like time. Basically, we have to see as many player as possible, and sometimes the number of viewings on each player is very different. So not really the case with him, but like just to give people an idea, um, like I live in Montreal, and I've not seen that player since maybe the early November. Like I was really busy with other player, in the WHL, in Europe, OHL, whatever. So maybe when I get more viewings, I'll be like Mark, and I'll be pushing him and for him in my top in my top 10. Let's talk about someone who there was zero debate about him this season for us. Carter Bear from Everett. I'll let you go with Carter Bear because he's the typical hockeyprospect.com type of player that we like. He brings everything we want into everything he brings on the ice. That's what we were looking for into players. So I'll let you go on Carter Bear.
Yeah, much like Seth Jarvis, who we had extremely high and thought that he could really be an impact player and hit our top 10. Carter Bear is a different player, but the feeling on our staff is very similar about both players at the same point in their initial draft season. So the big thing with Carter Bear is that much like Eklund, diamond floor. This kid is incredibly intelligent, one of the best competitors in the entire class. He's one of those players too that's just more than the sum of his parts. He gets it. He's just, when you're talking about he's a hockey player. Simple as that. You don't have to break him down mechanically. He's a hockey player. That said, let's peel back the layers a little bit here because for a lot of people, this is going to raise eyebrows. So the first thing I'll say is that this isn't just a byproduct of the fact that this is a bad class and we're looking for players with high floors. This player has, we think, a much better ceiling than has been publicly discussed. He can shoot in stride. He has a very good technical release. He's net front. He has exceptional one-touch playmaking ability. He processes information very, very rapidly. So he can think 2 steps ahead. He has technical ability, and it's one of those situations where he can dissect and carve through defenses in the WHL, and he's done just that. And one thing that I'm relieved about is when we first evaluated him, we really thought that he could take off and hit 90 to 100 points. And that's happened. This is not one of those situations for us where with Jet Lachenko, roughly just over point per game, it's one of those situations where if we bomb out on the player, it looks bad because the production wasn't there. With Bear, it's flourishing, it's there, and it's something we projected and predicted. And that really helps us feel more comfortable with having him where we do have him. He is an exceptional prospect. The only thing that is keeping him back of this top 5 is that he's not a truly dynamic offensive player. He's a very good one, but not a truly dynamic one in the way that like somebody like Frondell is, for instance.
Yeah, I feel like he's impossible to dislike as a prospect. I feel like if you don't have this guy really high in the draft, I don't know what you're watching. Skating, compete, smart. Remember, Brad, my comparable with this player was from a former Vancouver Canucks, but I really saw some Alex Burrows in him. Very tenacious, fast, can play left wing, right wing, power play, PK. Like just the number of things he can do on the ice is very, very good. One of my favorite player in last year's draft was Elias Mittinen, and they are doing some really good things together with Everett this season. If I'm Seattle, I'm doing whatever I can to draft Carter Bear, to be honest. I could see Mittinen and Bear being a really good duo down the road at the NHL level. But anyway, that's a story for another day here. But yeah, Carter Bear, hockeyprospect.com, more huge fan of his game, and we have him ranked number 6. Now at number 5, we have Porter Martone. So that's another guy we talked about in a recent episode, one of our first one of the year. Maybe Brad, a few notes on Martone. I just saw him a few weeks ago in Ottawa. It was probably the worst game I've ever seen Martone play. He's super talented, but just that game was just pretty bad for him and pretty bad overall for his team. So I'll let you go on Martone. Maybe a few notes on him. Why we have him 5? Where I just saw Craig Button's ranking today, and Craig has him as number 1 guy. I don't think Craig is the only one who has him number 1. So again, we're not in the same boat here, but there's a lot to like about Martone. Mostly skill level wise, he's pretty high up in the draft.
Yeah, he's extremely talented. One of the best dual threats in this class. One of the best shooters in this class. He fits in the Carbonneau. Really, it's Carbonneau, Frondell, and him that are the best shooters in this class. So that's why he's where he is. We don't see him like a lot of the public do. There's comparisons to Brady Tkachuk, who we love the entire year. We had Brady Tkachuk top 3 the entire season. And there's comparisons to Matthew Tkachuk as well, and Corey Perry. And none of our staff sees any of that. He is physical. He competes. He is not nasty. He's not a prick. He doesn't get below players' skins. He's not a dirty, greasy, chaotic driver. That's just not how he operates. So I don't really understand those comparisons. We think much more of a Mark Stone type of winger with better skating at the same age, which is a heck of a player. Mark Stone's a phenomenal player. So that's kind of how we see him stylistically. It's one of those situations where this is fluid. So don't be shocked at all if we have him a bit higher or maybe even a little bit lower by the end of the season. It really depends on his play and the play of everybody around him here. And it comes down to personal preferences too. Like that's another thing that might be overlooked here is like, I know for a lot of you, you're probably like, well, you take best player available. I'm going to be honest with you. I really don't think BPA really exists in drafts unless it's right. And I mean, right at the top. Connor Bedard, that's a no-brainer. Connor McDavid, that's another no-brainer. The last 2 seasons specifically with Bedard and Celebrini, I think have put people a bit in a frenzy when it comes to consensus again, where everybody's like, oh, well, we already know the number 1 and everybody's been talking about Hagens. And this is not that at all in this draft. Hagens is very unlikely to be a star level player like Celebrini. I don't think Celebrini or Bedard, Hagens doesn't come close to them in terms of tier range. So it's one of those situations where that opens up space for a lot of fluid discussion with these top end players. And Martone is absolutely one of them. It's just what's the drawback? Really, it's the skating. The skating is not great. It's not bad. It's just not great. So he doesn't really project to drive play at the level we typically want to see. It's one of the main reasons that Misa is above him, for instance, because Misa has the skating ability that projects to be able to drive at a rate Martone doesn't. However, to counterbalance it a bit, Martone's a better playmaker. So again, this is very tight. This is one of those situations where if you see Martone 5, and I'm using Misa as an example for a reason, Misa and Martone, you can go back and forth all day. And that's what we've been doing. And right now we've decided as a staff to just have Martone at 5 as a result.
Yeah, I mean, we can quickly jump to Frondell at number 4 because it was the battle was pretty between those two players for number 4, and we decided to keep Frondell at number 4. Decide a bit like Ryabkin to stay patient with him. Even when he was not playing well this year, he was kind of still producing, still score, I think 5 or 6 goals in G20, still produced at the Five Nation in November. Did he play great? No. Did he play great in G20? No. But we saw him last year. He was really good last year. He's a center. Physically, he's a beast. He is, like I said, he's younger than Martone, and we talked about it in the recent episode. But he's been dealing with some injuries since last season. Got hurt in March last season. There was similar or injury related to his March injury in September, so that made him miss a few, maybe a month. So I find like his rhythm is missing a bit. So he's slowly getting back into it. He played 2 solid games in the Allsvenskan and then he got hurt. So it's really tough for him to find his rhythm so far this season. But I still like the player. I saw so many good things from him last year. But obviously, in the second half, he's gonna have to show us, that he can still be the player we saw last year. But there's a ton of things here like that we like. Obviously, he's a power center. He can really shoot a puck. He's got really good hands. Puck protection is really solid too. I just before dropping him too much in our list, I really wanted to give him a really, a solid chance of proving to us that he's healthy. He can play, back to his, find his game shape. Basically, is what I'm trying to say here. Find his, being in better game shape and getting more reps. So like I think I said previously, like he's not gonna go at the U20. He's gonna play at the Junior A Challenge in Alberta in 2 weeks. Like that kid needs to play, and it's not a bad thing that he's gonna play with his. So Sweden, they're gonna have the U18 team, so he's gonna play with his buddies. He's gonna play with his age group. I think that's gonna be a pretty good tournament, a pretty important tournament for him. So let's wait and see. Obviously, if his play doesn't get better in the second half, we're gonna drop him. But I'm confident once he's in really good game shape and he's feeling confident and he's got his reps in. I think he's going to show us what he showed us, last season. So maybe Brad, you have a few things to say about Frondell.
Sure. So the first thing I'll say is he's the best shooter in this class. I know for some of you it's like, hang on, look at Misa's production, like look at Martone scoring upside as well. And they do have scoring upside. Make no mistake, but nobody has Frondell scoring upside in this class. From a mechanical base, he's the best. He's like Alex Semin, but with like a power frame on him when it comes to his shooting. So there's tremendous amount of upside with this player. I know behind the scenes too, scouts and executives I've talked to, they're very much in our camp where they're waiting because they know it's there. They're just waiting for the kid to get going because the upside is immense. It just has not taken shape. It's going to be a nightmare for us if it doesn't take shape this season because we're left with trying to figure out a way to rank him that reflects his season, but also still reflects his potential, and that's going to be extremely difficult. So out of anyone, we're praying to the hockey gods that we hope it gets going. It's definitely this player because there is vast potential. The other thing I'll say about this player is that he falls into a category that's kind of summarizing the whole class, which is there was a lot of expectations on some of these super talented players, and they're not living up to it. It's just one of those classes where for some reason, a lot of these kids were just better last year. Everybody we talked to, it's like, what happened to this kid? He was doing pretty well last year. Now, obviously, there's some exceptions to this rule. We're about to talk about one of them right at the top, and Schaefer, who have a tremendous season and has improved drastically over last year. But in terms of development curves, which are extraordinarily important to monitor during the draft season, we're looking at a lot of reverse and negative curves. A lot of these kids are going downhill the opposite direction you want them to go. Frondell is part of that. And that's one of the huge issues right now in really trying to solidify the top 10. This is what, again, we talk fluid in the top 5. Like this class, we might be moving players all over the map here as we continue on because there's just no way of really being able to structure a proper top 5 or 10 at this time.
Yeah. Like today, someone on Twitter sent me like a message saying, why is Martone not ranked above Frondell? Look at their stats. Obviously, we don't scout with stats, but he's like, their point per game this year, like it's ridiculous when you think about it. I'm like, okay, well, obviously the injury, the missed time is definitely, you have to take this into consideration. But I'm like, if you really want to play the stats game, Frondell had a better point per game average last year than Martone had. So, if you want to play the stats game, we can play that stats game, as much as you want. At this point, I think we really, I don't want to say we're confident because we're not, but we like the idea of what Frondell can be more than what Martone. So we think Frondell can be a better, NHL player than Martone, but it's really close. So, I mean, you have to pick what you like more. Like Frondell is a center versus swinger. If you put value in that, you're gonna want to have that center. So it's really tight. It's November, so a lot of things can change. And like I said, if Frondell doesn't get better in the second half, obviously he's gonna have to drop a bit. And yeah. So let's move on, Brad, to our top 3. Let's start with James Hagens from Boston College. playing on the top line at Boston College with most of the time with Ryan Leonard, I was going to say Gabriel Perreault. Only one goal this season, so his shooting percentage is way down compared to last season. Last season was actually he had a really high shooting percentage. This year it's obviously really, really low with one goal in 12 games, I believe, but he has a ton of assists. Obviously, his playmaking is his best asset as a hockey player. I guess we could talk about Misa at the same time because those were the battle between the two of them. And I think me personally, I went with Misa at number 2, and I was very far from being. I'm very far from being the biggest Misa fan, but I look at Misa having a bit more size, being younger, faster, definitely faster. I don't know. He can't do anything wrong this season, so I'm sure he's having bad games. We saw it. Like some games he was not that good, and he finished with 3 goals, 5 points, 4 points. So, so far I went with Misa, but it was a pretty tight battle between those two for the number 2 spot. But I feel like the battle is far from over. But just watching both guys this year, I feel like Misa has really improved from last year, and I don't know if Hagens is still good. I don't know if he has improved that much from last year, but it's close. It's a tight battle between the two of them. So Brad, I'll let you say a few words on those two center.
Sure. So I think he comes in the 4 slot in terms of goal scoring ability. So let's break down the shooting and what's going on here and contrast them a little bit to give our audience a better understanding of them. So the big thing here is that Misa operates very similar to Matvei Michkov. What I mean by that is that Matvei Michkov is a very good shooter, don't get me wrong, but when you look at it from a technical mechanic standpoint, he is not Connor Bedard, Austin Matthews, when you're talking like elite end, and then he's not at Cole Caulfield, where you're just talking right under. Then you go right through Igor Sharangovich to Oliver Bjorkstrand to Daniel Sprong. If I was to give like a tier list of very exceptional mechanical shooters that play from star to first line, second line, third line onward, he is not mechanically as gifted as those players I just mentioned. He is not as mechanically gifted as the top 3 in this class, which is why I think he's a little bit outside of that range, and that we just broke down with Carbonneau, Martone, and Frondell. The reason that he's 4th is that, like Michkov, it's the seam identification that is remarkable. So when you compare him to Hagens, one of the reasons Hagens' goal rates are down this season, well, there's multiple reasons. So the first, though, is that he's having difficulty recognizing when a lane is getting taken up, and he's shooting a lot into skates. Now, he's making an adjustment to college hockey. Misa's in the OHL. You have to take that into consideration. Much in the same way we try to take Frondell's production, where he was phenomenal at the J20 level relative to Martone's in his -1, but he's in a better league in the OHL. So again, we have to compare and contrast. It's difficult to do. The thing with Hagens is he shoots right now very similar to Kent Johnson. What that means is that he's like a trick shooter. He looks for lower percentage shot angles, but tries to surprise goalies and take advantage of that. He has not succeeded so far. Why? Because 2 reasons. One, not mechanically as gifted as shooters like Daniel Sprong, like Kent Johnson, like the other players I mentioned. But the other reason is that he's forcing his shot. So earlier in the season, I watched every shot he's taken this year before this podcast to make sure I had the refresher and got it right. The first half of his games, he's actually shooting more high percentage shots. It's the second half now that he's starting to really force his shot. And what that indicates or reflects to me is that, as we all know, this is a young kid. He has a tremendous amount of pressure. Social media is real. He is the projected number 1. He's forcing his shot right now. It will come around. He's also hit multiple posts. When it comes to like actual technical shooting mechanics, I actually think Hagens has a better shot than Misa. Hagens has better bottom hand activation, which for Jonathan Lekaramaki, for instance, some of the best bottom hand activation you'll see that's coming in the NHL right now is an example of what I mean by that. Shane Wright is another player with tremendous kinetic chain that allows him to have excellent bottom hand activation, even though admittedly he's not scoring right now. So mechanically, he's ahead of Misa, but Misa is scoring at a ridiculous rate. So again, this goes back to Michkov. He doesn't have his shots blocked as often as Hagens does. And the other factor is that, and this is what makes Michkov special, is what makes Misa special too. When they're looking at a goalie, they seem to have a sixth sense on how a goalie is going to transfer against them and then place their shot specifically to a seam that's open on the goalie as he's dynamically shifting. That is the nuance that, from a scouting perspective, we look at to make sure that the goals can still translate. Because, as you know, Jérôme, in Matvei Michkov's draft year, one thing we were really perplexed by is like he doesn't shoot anything like Alex Ovechkin. He's not a Russian who's just going to overpower goalies with a one-timer and just have this dominant wheelhouse. He is sly, he's sophisticated, he's calculated, and he just recognizes exactly the right time and space. I'm sure for some of you listening to this, Philly fans, you saw the goal he placed on Linus Ullmark in overtime on the short side. That's what I'm referring to. That type of dynamism when it comes to placement and the timing, that's what makes Misa special. Now, when you factor in Misa's skating and driving potential, it means that long-term, he should have more opportunities as of this writing than theoretically Hagens would to be able to have the scoring rates. However, what counterbalances that is that Hagens is definitely the better playmaker. He is absolutely, unquestionably, to me, the better playmaker. So it's a give and take. You do look for the speedy center who can score more, or do you look for the bit more, I would say, versatile and higher level of hockey sense in terms of the playmaking ability and vision out of Hagens? So this is absolutely an ongoing debate. On our staff, you go back and forth between different scouts, and you're going to have different opinions about who should ultimately be two here. But there's no denying Misa's production. And there's no denying that Hagens has had a bit of a slow start, and he's forcing his play as a result, I think, of the pressure he's dealing with being the consensus number one coming into the season.
Listen, so for people, I want people to be aware of this. Before we start recording, you and I were going at it, arguing about about Misa and Hagens. So listen, we're having a good time here. And we'll move on to our number one ranked player. There was no debate over that one, for us at least. Matthew Schaefer from the Erie Otters. I mean, since he came back from his mono, he's been, lights out in the OHL. One of the youngest player in the draft. I think he's 10 days away from not being eligible for the draft. He'd be a 226 eligible prospect. So, beautiful skater. He's gonna his skating is really good right now. But give him time. He's gonna be even more explosive in a few years when he's becomes like really like he get his a few pounds, like maybe like he's 6'1", 6'2", maybe he might play at 200 pounds. Right now he's about 180, so 180, 185, I believe. So give him a few years, and you'll see like he's gonna be even more explosive than what he is now. Very agile too. Like he can beat player one-on-one. Obviously we knew about the skating coming into the year, but I've been really impressed with his ends. Like one-on-one, he's really like he has made some player in the OHL look really bad so far this season. Production-wise, I mean, I think he's got 18 points as we're recording. Last season he had 16 in 55, 60 games. So we talk about the curve. A lot of players are having bad curve this year. Schaefer, his curve is way up. He's going way up with his development curve. So to us, he is the kind of like an easy number one player to rank. He's really good now, and he's only going to get better. Plays a ton with the Otters. Like he plays mostly, not mostly, but easily, 25 minutes a game. A lot of time it's 30 minutes a night. He's playing against the top player from the other team. Like he's not like a stud defender yet, but we feel like it's gonna be good enough. in maybe at the end of the season, maybe next season. If he goes number one in the draft, there's a good chance that team that drafts him will play him at the NHL level. Not doesn't really happen that often that the number one pick doesn't play right away. Maybe Owen Power was the last one, maybe, but before him there was not many first overall pick that did not play right away. So yeah, we're a huge fan of Schaefer. He has a lot of tools that's going to make him a really exciting power play, exciting number one defenseman, but exciting on the power play too to quarterback the power play. He can beat you with his brain. He can beat you with his speed. He can beat you with his hands. I could go on and on here. So Brad, I'll let you maybe conclude with maybe your thoughts on Schaefer.
Sure. Like the massive factor, as Jérôme said, age. He's like less than 2 weeks from eligibility next season. When it's tight, that makes a massive difference in our rankings. The other factor is we have given a stylistic comparison of Mike Matheson. It's a good one, but it doesn't really speak to the true production or upside of the player. So let's give another one, Jérôme, that I think is pretty viable. That's Josh Morrissey. The version of Josh Morrissey that's playing right now, the point per game version, the dominant true number one defenseman that you're seeing is basically what we think of Mike Matheson's upside. I know for some of you listening, it's like, well, that's not a star player. I mean, that's a heck of a player. To me, I think Josh Morrissey's probably a top 5 defenseman in the league right now, at least top 7, 8 for sure.
Did he won a Norris Trophy? So, or he was a finalist? Maybe?
Yeah, he was a finalist. Yeah. So he's right there, right? So, I mean, can you call him a star? I mean, you could argue which market, right? If it's the right market, he'll probably be labeled a star. If he's in the wrong market, he'll probably not be labeled a star. But in terms of actual ability on the ice and impact value, if you think Josh Morrissey's a star, he probably is the only one we see in this draft, and that is absolutely the reason we have him number one. He has been the highest impact player relative to Hagens and Misa when you try to project them long term. But again, it's tight. And who knows? Maybe Misa, Hagens, Frondell, Martone, one of them overtakes him over time. But right now, we really think that it's clearly Schaefer.
I mean, one thing I've learned is to never say never in scouting. So I'm not going to say I don't see that happening, but I'd be surprised if Schaefer is not our number one guy until the end of the year. But I'm not going to say never. Brad, so that was our quick, we're about 15 minutes here.
Yeah, real quick. our usual time for the top 10.
So that was like maybe a breakdown of our top 10. Maybe in future episode, we're going to talk about more players that are on this list. So if people want to see the full list, they can go on hockeyprospect.com. The top 32 is free. And we also have the top 64. So if you want to be a member of the website, you will have access to the top 64. Also the goalie list that Brad and I have worked on this season. So we have a top 5 goalie list right now. The goalie list is it's been an interesting time scouting goalies this year. We might discuss this maybe in a future episode at some point, maybe before the Christmas break. The goalie of this draft class quite different from last year. Last year was a crazy. There were so many goalies last season. Maybe not so much this season, but we feel pretty good about the top 5 that we have. So if you want to see that goalie list, the ranking from 33 to 64, just go over hockeyprospect.com and subscribe. You can become an insiders. I'll leave some links in the description of this video so you can easily know where to go. Just before we wrap up, I want to mention maybe in the next 2 weeks we might have some guests on. We have 2 scouts that I already talked to them. So Christian and J. Brad will come visit us on scouting session. They're going to talk about their region. So J. Brad will be talking about the WHL, and Christian talking about the USHL, the NTDP. So we're gonna get those guys on with us in the probably the next 2 weeks. So for Brad, from me, we'll see you guys next week. And thanks for watching. And don't forget, subscribe to our channel and like our video. It helps us, grow the channel. So thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you guys next week.
Take care, everyone.